All right. Good morning, everybody. Figured that was a good time to end there, right at the end of the song. So, before we get going, are there any questions that you want to talk about before I jump into what I was planning on covering?
I have two questions, if I may.
Fire away. Yep.
My
Jason will
first
be happy
one,
to answer them.
Jason. Okay. What's your thoughts about a cancellation fee on listings? Putting it in the
um,
contract at time of listing. So do an addendum to the ERS because I'm
yeah,
getting frustrated with that in this market of people just thinking they can cancel everything with no, you know,
yeah.
ramifications. Just wanted to
If
see your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think if you want to do that and the client will agree to it, I don't have a problem with it.
Okay. And then my second one is I remember when all the changes were happening, we were talking about putting also on the an addendum to the ERS that an unrepresented buyer that we would be able to collect, a fee.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Uh-huh. So are you just asking if that's okay or what? I'm not sure what the question.
More verbiage and what have you been seeing? Has that been something that has been useful with the changes? Um, I'm going
I
into
haven't
listing presentation. I want to be just prepared for a couple of things like that.
got you. Yeah, I have actually have not seen many agents do that. I don't know if Jason has or not, but I've seen a couple that have done that have just done an addendum. And on the addendum, and I don't know that I'm going to give you the exact verbiage that they used, but basically just saying in the event that the buyer is of the home is unrepresented, then the brokerage fee would be 5% or 4 or whatever they decided to do on that. So I
Okay.
think that's what I would say is just do an addendum to it, just saying in the event um the buyer purchasing the home is unrepresented, then the listing brokerage fee will be X.
So would it be a total or would it be an addition to what is already agreed upon?
I would think you could probably word it either way. You could word it as then, if the buyer's unrepresented, the total listing brokerage fee would be X, or you could say it would be, and you could word it as in the event the buyer is unrepresented, the brokerage fee will increase from this to this or be an additional X amount. I think just
Okay.
as long as it's clear and since Brianna's on here, as long as when Brianna gets it, she isn't confused, I think we're good.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Cool. Okay, any other questions?
Can I
You could
ask
also,
something?
Lisa, on that
Oh,
one, you
sorry.
could also just include it in 2.1. Just have the full amount, and then if they are represented and you're gonna do a commission, you could do an addendum at that point to bring it back down. If you don't want to have the conversation that, hey, you're gonna pay me more, you could have you're paying me this much, but if somebody is represented, then I'll actually reduce mine down to 3 or wherever you're going to go to. I'll reduce it to help cover the other agent as well. So either way you can do it.
That's not a bad idea, just to have it be
That
a put up put
that
a
just
higher
confused
amount.
me. That just
Well,
confused me. I'm sorry.
I'll restate it how I understood it, and then Jason can tell us if he agrees or not. But
Okay.
how I understood it, which I think is not a bad idea, is to maybe you on your listing agreement you're going to put that the commission is going to be 6%, and then you do an addendum to that saying in the event that the buyer is represented, then the commission would go down to 3% or something. Is that kind of what you were saying, Jason? Yeah. Does that make sense, Lisa?
Kind of.
So in
If I
essence,
get
you would just be
if I
putting
get
it out.
stuck, I'm calling Jason.
Perfect. That works.
Thank
Perfect.
you.
Chris, you had something, I think.
I do. I just wanted to ask all of you who have had listings lately, if you are seeing more subject to sale of buyers' properties. And along with that, the active time clause, which keeps it on the market, but in my experience, I have not seen it really being an advantage to ticking up those days on market, because I haven't seen people, clamoring still to come in and make offers. Just wanted to know what people's feelings are with regards to that, what you're seeing in your personal experiences. Did that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I think I'll wait and see if other people, does anybody have any thoughts on that? From what you've been seeing?
And this isn't recently, but just within the last year, maybe. I was nervous about doing a time clause that it would kind of scare some people away, right? Not even try. But actually, I thought it worked out really well. I mean, they both ended up closing, and you know what I mean? I thought it was good, and we still got offers in, and I bet, that's just my experience.
So Julie, are you saying you used the time clause and you were able to get a different offer?
Yes, that is what she was saying.
Thank you.
And then in the chat, Jenny put in there that she's been seeing a lot of time clauses lately. So
I didn't feel like it kept people away from bringing a competitive offer. We ended up going with the original, but we still had people inquiring. My concern was, oh no, it's going to scare people away. But I don't know, it worked out.
Maybe I should say kind of what my thought is, if doing an active time clause or a backup, it continues to have the days on market. And then if you have a subject to sell and then a subject to sell on that property, and then something happens and the contract is canceled, then you may be, who knows, 45, 50 days after that when on the market. And then people start thinking, well, what is the problem with this? Rather than having days on market stop and just going under contract. That's my thought. I'm just trying to weigh those thoughts in my mind. So
yeah, I don't think there's a right answer on that.
Okay, just give that information to the seller and let them decide.
That's kind of what I think. Yeah, because there are advantages and disadvantages to both, like you're saying. So I think it kind of just depends on how the transaction plays out to be, oh, I'm glad we did, or I wish we hadn't. So.
Right. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Awesome. Good questions, guys. So, okay. So what I thought I would go through and talk about today is just a couple of things from the division newsletter, a couple of disciplinary sanctions, I guess. I don't know I can't remember what the right term is, but anyway, so I just thought I'd share a few of those. This first one, and actually, ironically enough, as we go through this, you're going to notice, I think, if I remember right, all three of them, I think, are down in the St. George area. So just for whatever reason, I noticed as I went through the division newsletter this time that the major issues seem to be down in Washington County for some reason on this one. So anyway, so this first one, this agent here, this happened in July. She admitted that she had breached her fiduciary duty to her principal. So what happened in this is the buyer of the transaction, they were going to purchase some vacant land and a modular home that was going to be put on there. And from as reading through this, it kind of feels like the seller was going to put this modular home on there. And so this agent represented both the buyer and the seller as a limited agent. And the buyer in their offer did the earnest money check directly to the seller. So they paid him with a cashier's check. And the agent was there when the buyer handed the check then to the seller. And so the division is saying that this agent didn't take possession of the check or secure the funds in her brokerage trust account. And then this is, I think, probably the biggest thing that I want to point out to you. It says, and she did not warn the buyer regarding the dangers of payment without securing title to the property or having the fully executed documents. Now, typically, that's not going to be an issue, meaning because we're going to collect the earnest money and it's either going to go to the title company or to the brokerage. But in this particular case, this was land with a modular home. So remember, in terms of mobile homes, which we are not technically licensed as agents for mobile homes, meaning they're personal property, not real property. And so as a result of that, I want to remind you, we do not hold the earnest money on a mobile home. Now, in this case, the one we're talking about here was land and a modular home. So because it was land, what the division is saying is really the agent should have taken that earnest money and put it into a trust account. But because she let it go directly to the seller, and then, like I said, the key thing on this is didn't warn the buyer of the dangers of giving the money directly to the seller. And the danger of that, hopefully you guys recognize, is what ends up happening in this transaction is that it fell apart and the buyer requested that they get their earnest money back. Well, the seller didn't give it back to them. And so the division found that this agent had breached her fiduciary duties that she had to the buyer, and they ended up charging her or penalizing her $10,000 in a penalty from the division on that. So just a reminder, first thing is on mobile homes, they are not real property, and therefore we cannot hold earnest money in our trust account for a mobile home. And in the event that the division were to come and audit us, we could be fined for that as well. So when anytime you're going to be doing a mobile home, the options are that you give that to the seller, that the buyer holds that earnest money, or if you can get a title company or some third party to hold it, then you can go ahead and do that. But I think the key thing I wanted to point out is if you end up doing something mobile home related and they're going to just give the money, that earnest money to the seller, make sure that you put something in writing warning them of the danger of giving that to them prior to receiving the actual property. And because it looks like from this, the division is saying, hey, that was kind of the biggest issue on that. So any thoughts or questions on that before I go on to the next one that I was going to talk about?
So should she have taken the earnest money or just have something in writing?
So yeah, I think what the division felt like on this one was because there was land involved on this one, it wasn't just a mobile home, that she really should have taken it and put it into her trust account. But if not, like I think they weren't saying it was a problem that she gave it to them. The problem was she didn't warn them that, hey, you might not be able to just get it back very easily if you just give it to the seller without the title being transferred to you. So I think it was more the issue of didn't warn them, and probably should have, because it was land, gone ahead and taken it to their trust account.
Yeah, rule of thumb, just document everything, especially exchange of money. I mean, you can't go wrong doing that, right?
Correct. Yep. Cool. Good. Okay. Next one then is, and again, this is down in St. George. So I think we have Tracy on here. I think she's the only one St. George one. So not trying to pick on St. George.
Pointing those out.
I'm not trying to pick on St. George. It just so happens that this month, most of them are in St. George. So this one, the agent was the principal and limited agent in a transaction in which her and her husband ended up leasing a property. So this agent has a property that her and her husband end up leasing it. And what ended up happening though is they first had leased it out to somebody else, or they were going to be leasing it to another tenant, but then that person backed out. And so this agent and her husband went ahead and executed a lease agreement for them to lease the property. So think of it as she's got the listing of she's going to be trying to lease this property for a client, and then she ends up leasing it herself. Okay. But then she didn't give them the security deposit, didn't give to the owner the security deposit until 18 months after it was required based on their lease agreement. And so this agent then said, hey, yeah, I did violate Utah law and the administrative rules. But the couple of things that she did wrong on this one is that she didn't turn the money in within a reasonable time. So again, that's another good reminder of when you're receiving earnest money, make sure you are getting it brought into the office within a reasonable amount of time. And that reasonable amount of time is going to be according to the contract, right? Whatever the contract says. But the other thing that she did in this is she acted as a limited agent in a transaction to which she was the principal. So just remember, you cannot be a limited agent in a transaction where you are either on the buy side or the sell side and have any interest in that. And so on this particular one, they fined her $5,000 in that scenario. So this one, the reminder is, can't be in the principal, and 2, make sure you're getting your earnest monies turned in a reasonable amount of time. And then interestingly on this one, the next person on here is that agent's husband who's unlicensed, and they fined him as well, which I thought was a little interesting because I thought when somebody's not licensed, they didn't have any jurisdiction over them, but apparently they still fined him even though he wasn't licensed. All right, the last one, not in St. George. So I was wrong. This last one was not in St. George. So this one, what happened is the agent was representing the buyer of a new construction home. So from the builder, the buyer failed to qualify for the loan to purchase, and the builder terminated that contract with the buyer. And the agent then declined to return the earnest money deposit to the buyer, which was fine because during their investigation, the division determined that based on the contract, he shouldn't have gotten the earnest money back. But when the division requested from the agent to get a copy of the agency agreement, the buyer broker, the agent failed to give them a copy. Now, what they don't say in here is that because the agent didn't have one? And that would be my bet, is that they just didn't have one. But because they couldn't give them copies of their contract, they got fined $1,000 and told they had to complete 3 hours of continuing education. So on this one, again, it's just a reminder of making sure that, one, you're getting that buyer broker signed or a listing agreement signed. But also, too, for us, as long as you're getting it put into dotloop and submitted to us, I've seen even just this week, Brianna has had some transactions, or a transaction at least, that there's no paperwork in dotloop. So she's gotten the closing, but we have zero documentation. So a reminder on that, as soon as you get those documents, get them put into dotloop and hit the submit for review so that it gets turned into the office. The good news is, as long as you've done that, if the division then requests those documents, we're going to have them, and we're going to be holding those according to the time frame that we're supposed to hold on to all of those documents. So, any thoughts or comments, questions on any of those things? All right. Anything, Jenny or Brianna, thoughts that you guys have from any of that? And you don't need to, but just curious. Take that as a no.
I have a question
ahead,
that's
Ridley.
not related to this at all. When you go, let's say you got a contract on October the 1st, but you didn't go under contract until the 10th of October, and you're going to go in and change your MLS as a listing agent to the date that it says date of contract. Do you put October 1st or the day that you actually accepted the contract and went under contract?
A date that you accepted and went under contract is what you would want to put.
Another agent asked me that, and that's what I told them, but I wanted to confirm I did the right thing. It's the day that you go under contract, because it says date of contract. The date of the contract was October 1st, but the day we went under contract was the 10th. And that's the date that I put on, because that's the date you want to show on the MLS.
Correct. And you really didn't have a contract, a fully executed contract, until that date anyway. So
But
Yep.
for some reason it says date of contract, so it's a little fuzzy, but okay.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
guided them directly. I said, you better go ask. She goes, no, I'm not asking. I'm always the one that has to ask. But okay, good news. Thanks.
Well, tell Stephanie she doesn't need to be afraid to ask.
Oh, good Lord. You're on
Just
to us.
kidding.
Thanks.
Okay. Any other questions or thoughts or comments? Cool deal. Okay. Well, thank you all for being on here. Welcome to winter. We hopefully are going to go back to fall here in the next week or during this week. But anyway, thanks for being on here. Have an outstanding weekend. If you have any questions that we can help with, let me or Jason know. And I see Ruby's on here. She can help as well. But you guys are awesome and keep up the good work. And we'll talk to you next time.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
You're welcome.